I need help getting up on the stool.
Hey, everybody. That's awesome. It's so good to see people out there.
Yeah, to be able to see them, yeah.
Awesome.
So, it was so good to hear everybody else's definitions earlier and the first three speakers. And of course, when you start talking about a topic like vulnerability, there's a lot of resonance in the room. And so we thought we would share a little bit about our journey in vulnerability within our relationship. When we met, I'd had many relationships before. I have 2 ex-husbands. I've been in many serious relationships, long-term, short-term, the whole gamut. And I had decided after my last relationship, after having done a lot of personal work, that I was never going to show up in a relationship again without being fully myself. Whoever was going to meet me was going to get Jill Prescott full on. I wasn't going to hide a damn thing. And, you know, that's really easy to say, right? You can set this intention for it, but then when real life shows up, and when you say something like that, then that's exactly what gets thrown in your face to learn over and over again. So when we make a declaration or we draw a line in the sand, then the universe says, okay, I'm coming to meet you. Are you sure you want that? And starts pushing in. And so even from the very beginning with Chris and I, the very first vulnerable moment for me in the relationship was before we'd ever actually physically met. So we had been talking on the phone for a couple of weeks. We met online dating. And I guess we were about a week and a half into a daily conversation. And I said to him, of course, after I shared this with my best girlfriend, I said to him, I'm not actually sure if you're attracted to me or if you just want to be friends. Like, I couldn't tell what was going on. He just was so different than anyone else I'd ever met. He wasn't calling me baby. He wasn't asking for naked pictures. He wasn't like...
I missed out.
He wasn't doing any of those things, you know? There was none of that going on. Truth is, he doesn't know how to flirt. He's got 0 game. But I didn't know that at the time.
I got lots of game. I got you.
So that was kind of the beginning of the vulnerability for me. And it was because of his response to my vulnerability that I could keep moving into that space, that I could keep opening up to more vulnerability, that I felt safe enough for the bigger things, for the bigger conversations that were vulnerable for me. And it's been a real journey of, and he also met me just before menopause. And I don't know if how many women know what happens in menopause, but all hell breaks loose. So he also met me at that time, and all the things start coming up about your sex life and your body changes and your hormones and all of that stuff. Well, you know, I also had to be really vulnerable through that with him, and I had to risk that he wouldn't want to stick around. So I'd found somebody who I was deeply in love with and knew that this was someone that I could really create an amazing life with. And I had to keep stepping into vulnerability over and over. And it was his reflection back to me that made it okay.
Awesome. The underlying score about being vulnerable in a relationship is what I found out later, actually within this relationship, is, are you willing to give it up? What do you have staked in the relationship that you're willing to let go? And the answer to that is actually what led me to the freedom to actually enter the relationship fully. I didn't quite know exactly when we started that I was choosing vulnerability as a mode in which to be in the relationship. Because the only thing I told myself was, you know what, I'm not going to do a relationship where I'm half present, where I'm not fully myself, where for some reason I have to censor aspects of myself because XYZ, may happen in the relationship. They may not like this part of me. I made a full commitment to myself to say, you know what? The whole package is coming in. If somebody is out there who is actually able to hang with that Chris Dube as he is, that's the relationship that I want. It was in the back of my head. I didn't quite know it. So, Jill was way far ahead of the game. I could tell I was with somebody who was a truth teller to the core. Somebody would say things, I loved it. It was so refreshing to be with somebody who said what was there within the moment, what they were feeling, and this is what was present. It was for me to not necessarily respond, but it was simply for me to recognize this is what's there. That was fantastic for me. So it allowed me to gradually step into that role and to know that this is actually somebody I want to be with and I want to appear as in the relationship. But things were rocky. So it's one weekend, we both don't know what was happening. We scratched our heads at home trying to figure out, okay, what was happening with that weekend? What really was throwing us off? But it was a relationship, it was a weekend where we finally were at that phase where we thought, this is it. This thing is on the rocks, it's going to end. Mm-hmm. And we were part of a group meeting up with some mentors of ourselves in White Rock. They had a group meeting. I don't know how you describe it.
Yeah, so Chris and I both work with mentors and all of that stuff. And this couple are also dear, dear friends of ours, and they hold weekends where you're basically doing some very profound, deep, emotional and spiritual work. Mm-hmm.
Spiritual excavation, I think.
Yeah. So we were going to go to this weekend together. And whatever had happened at that point, whatever was going on, we were done. I didn't know that we were going to make it out the other side of that weekend. We didn't know if we were going to make it out the other side of that weekend.
Right. So Jill shared that at the weekend and basically expressed that she thought, yeah, that was it. And for me, I felt the same way too. But the process of sharing with other people what you're actually going through was kind of a first step in consciously appearing in the relationship as, you know what, chips may fall where they may fall. I am simply going to show up. This is what's going on for me. I'm going to share it. And anyone else around me can receive it or not receive it, but what I've done my part in terms of actually revealing what's going on for me. So that was step A for me. That weekend allowed me to sort of begin the process of consciously being present in the relationship.
It was like we had to be willing to let it break. Mm-hmm. We had to be willing to say, in order that I am not willing to give up myself for this relationship, that I am going to, and I don't ever want you to give up yourself for the relationship either. It was the willingness on both our parts to say, I love you deeply, and this is actually where I'm at. Can you be with it? And can we be with it? And can we come through the other side of it?
Mm-hmm. This was part one. So what I remember is I finally had a conversation with Bill and Patricia on my own. And because it felt like, you know what, we're still struggling. This is not going to happen.
I remember now what was going on.
Okay. What was happening?
Well, and my thing was I never felt like you were present with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Chris was late all the time.
That.
There was things going on like that, and it felt to me like he wasn't actually present in the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that now. Anyway, in my conversation with Bill and Patricia, trying to unravel this thing, So we start talking, and I start trying to express what's going on with Jill. So she's like that, she's like this, and then Bill just pipes in and said, Chris, this is not about Jill. This is about you. Don't talk about Jill at all. So, and I had to pause, because for me, he changed the dynamic of the relationship to, it's not about the other person. The relationship is always about you. And so what allowed me to begin to face the relationship was actually facing inward instead of outward. Because I was looking outward and trying to figure, okay, this is what's going on. That's the other thing that's going on. And this is driving me crazy. And no, it's actually what was going on in here, inside me. So he allowed me to say, one of the things he shared with me was, in a relationship, men are like spiritual gravity. You hold the planet. And we were talking about presence, and this is the concern that Jill had. And your presence is what allowed the relationship to fully function. What is your spiritual gravity in this relationship? It made me pause. And it's not about the things you say or do, whatever. It's like a presence. It's a thing that you just embody and carry with you. So we went through the exercise, and he led me through a grounding exercise that I could do in order to, but most of it was, okay, he finally asked me, are you willing to let the relationship die? I wasn't willing at that stage. I was not willing. I was holding on to it. I was grasping at it. I wanted it to work because I thought it was a great thing. I wanted it to work. He asked me again, are you willing to let it die? It took me a while. I finally turned around and said, yeah, I'm willing to let it die, if that's what it means. He said, yeah, okay. We finished. That evening, you were speaking at the Zen Lounge?
Yeah.
Zen Lounge. I drove in after having spoke with Bill and Patricia, went into the room, walked in, and Jill saw me. And the first thing, she was close to the stage and said, that's my partner, Chris. Something, I hadn't said anything, I hadn't spoken to her. She just saw me, and I immediately saw she had seen a shift, an energetic shift in me. I hadn't said anything. But for me, that only came through vulnerability, of willingness to let it all go away. So the presence of vulnerability allowed me to be fully present in that moment without words. I noticed it, and I still remember that moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that in a lot of relationships, and I know in my past relationships, somebody, one of your speakers was talking earlier about how you would mold yourself to somebody else. You would do whatever is necessary to make somebody else happy, and that's what I was. I was right for everybody. I never had a problem finding a boyfriend because, I would just shape myself around that person. And so in us both being willing to be deeply authentic with each other, which is such a massive, it's woven together with vulnerability, we actually got to show up so fully as ourselves that we found that the relationship was true. Mm-hmm. When we were willing to just bear it all. This is who I am, and this is who I am, and this is what I need, and this is what I need. And Chris is a hugely grounding presence for me, and I require that. You may have noticed. I can be
fire.
I have a lot of energy and a lot to say, and I feel extremely deeply, and I have a huge amount of empathy, and it's vital for me, even in the work that I do in the world, that I have the space to go very deeply into whatever happens to be going on for me, whether that's joy, or whether that's grief, or confusion, or upset, or whatever's there. I have to be able to go fully into it. And because I know that he has chosen to be here that he's chosen to stand fully in his grounding, his very natural grounding energy, there's no problem. There's upset sometimes, and then it's gone, and we move on.
Yeah. And the amazing thing, I think, is allowing yourself to be vulnerable allows the other person complete freedom to be who they want to be. And you create a safe space for them. So I feel like we do this for each other. You know, I feel like I am actually fully, I'm looking for another word than allowed, but it's not allowed. I'm like fully have that permission or the space in order to actually totally explore how I want to explore myself within the context of the relationship, and that it will be okay. Even if it means that we drift apart from each other because of the authenticity of searching for myself to show up as me in the world, even if that means we outgrow each other, that will not necessarily diminish the love. It sounds strange, like a paradox, but it is actually true. And I give Jill the same freedom to actually completely continue to explore who she wants to be in the world so that I can also be who I want to be in the world.
So in real time, what we're dealing with right now is, in the relationship, is where we're going to live. My life has set up, I was in the car business for 20 years, and I walked away in 2012, and I've been building my own business ever since then. And from the very beginning, I've said, if I will do all the work. I'm full in, both feet. I mean, I tried to escape a couple times. It doesn't work. You swallow the red pill, it's over. I did try to escape. But anyway, that I would be able to be mobile, that I could live anywhere in the world. And that was it's so important to me that I be able to just have that freedom. And right now in the relationship, I'm in a position where I could live anywhere in the world. And Chris isn't. He's not in that place right now. He's moving towards it. But realistically, it's going to be a while. Mm. So we're in this place right now where I've asked him, and I've asked myself, so we'll do this separately and then come together in this conversation, to go do his meditation, do his own soul searching, and get really, really clear about where he really wants to be and what he wants to do and what he wants that to look like. And I'll do the same. And we'll come back together and we'll connect that way through meditation and through practices that we have, and we'll see if we can make it work. We'll see if we can line it up. But the bottom line is, there's a risk.
Yeah, and there's one line that's already been repeated here. I think it was Anita. That there is no vulnerability that doesn't take courage, and in order to be courageous, it will require being vulnerable. So I was hearing that for myself in terms of what we are facing. So that eventually it will require me being courageous, and also as a result of that, being vulnerable.
Yeah, and we want to be together. And we can start already talking about possibilities. If he wants to be someplace and I want to be somewhere else, in long-distance relationships, there's all of that stuff. And if we are not willing to say goodbye to the relationship in order to follow our own hearts and our own desire and our own calling, because both of us feel very strongly called, then those things are not a possibility. We must be willing, we're discovering, is that we must be willing to say, I'll let it all go, in order for there even to be a possibility of a solution, if it doesn't happen to be a perfect match.
Yeah. But of course, it starts with being fully present. I'm going to be fully myself within this context, within this relationship. And if it doesn't work, I'll still be that same person.
Yes.
All right, we've got a couple questions here that we would like to...
We haven't read them yet, so this...
We have not read them.
I'm not going to ask who wrote them.
I'll give the first question to Jill.
Right. I'm afraid that showing my vulnerability might result in being taken advantage of. Is that a realistic thought? Yes. It is, and I'll expand on that a little bit. you will very quickly learn when you open up and be vulnerable who it is that you can be vulnerable with and who can hold space for your vulnerability. Mm-hmm. The beautiful thing is, if you are vulnerable and someone attempts to take advantage of you, you'll know real fast that they're not to be in your life. So the falseness falls away. And I'm going to be honest about this. Before the life I led before, there was no vulnerability. I didn't have a brick wall. I had a brick box I was walking around in. So, you know, when I starting the vulnerability and breaking that down, it was brutal. It was brutal. I lost everything. There are, you know, so many people that went away. I lost so much, and yet I would not, you know, and you hear this all the time, but for real, I would not go backwards. There's more in my life now. There's more love. There's more connection. There's more, all of it in my life now than there ever was before. And it would not have been possible had I not said, I'm going to have the courage to be vulnerable here. And the interesting thing is, and I tell you, it's never a conscious thought. I didn't one day actually just say that to myself. I never read a Brené Brown book before I started on this journey. It's just a heart call that what is happening isn't working. And there has to be something else. And the heart is what calls you forward.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Do you have anything to say about this one?
No.
Okay.
You covered it beautifully. This is the question. Do you have a relationship cycle? How do you break it? What is your practice? Wow, that's a very powerful question.
Chris has only had 2 relationships, so he doesn't have a cycle.
That's not entirely. I was just about to say I'm not very qualified to speak about it, but all I can say is a relationship cycle is actually a reminder that there is a lesson to learn that's not being learned. Mm-hmm. That's why it keeps repeating. So it keeps coming back and knocking you on the head and keeps coming back and waiting for you to recognize that something else other than the relationship is being pointed to. So I think for me, the relationship cycle was actually because I got divorced and I was very, very clear that I did not want to repeat it. And I think the repetition was, I did not feel like I have my full presence within the relationship. There were parts of my relationship that were just basically absent or in the shadow or just to the side that were very, very critical for me, but were not being shared within the relationship. It's not blaming anybody else, but there was no opportunity to actually share that. So the only thing I would point to is to say, go past the relationship, you know, past the fence, past the barrier. What's behind that? What's going on? Maybe Jill can add a little bit on that.
Yeah, so on a practical side of it, if you've already recognized that there's a pattern, that's the first step.
Fantastic. Yeah.
There's an opportunity right there. And then it's really acknowledging your part in the pattern, because there's only one person. There's only one continuum if you've created a pattern, and that's you. So it's an opportunity to step back from relationships and start developing the relationship in here first. Mm-hmm. And again, I know it's cliche, but I'm telling you, it's so unfortunate, I feel, that some of this ancient wisdom that we've been talking about for millenniums is being turned into marketing devices in so many ways. So that's just a little side pet peeve of mine. But it's true, because there's so, you know, when I say it now, they're like, yeah, I heard that shit before. But really it is, like, the relationship with self. And this is another big thing with us too, is that I am here for me. Chris is here for him. And because of that, we can trust each other. So when we are together in relationship, there's this third energy that arrives in the relationship that feeds us and nourishes the relationship without us having to like vampire off of each other. So, and that can't happen until you're in powerful relationship with self.
Awesome. This last one is not really a question, but he says relationships, WTF. Hey, you know what?
You're in one.
You're in one. Because I'll tell you the truth, and everybody knows this already. This life is about interaction. And every lesson that we are here to learn is really about in interaction with another thing that's in relationship with another thing. It's about connections. It's about relationships. So there you go.
Yeah, you're in one all the time. All the time. You can't avoid it. So then the question is, what kind of relationship do you now want to create? So it's not what the F, it's what do you want to create? Yeah.
All right.
Anything else?
That's it.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.